Tracks. Let's talk music.
Hi, it's Robbie from Chatting Tracks. How you doing out there? Things never work how you want to, do they? I've literally just got home from the cinema. I just got in. I thought, I'll jump on and do a live stream, just talk about this amazing film I've just seen. And then all my stuff decided not to work. So I had to jump into something completely different. Anyway, hopefully you can hear me now. Hopefully everything's all good and good in the hood. Anyway, I've just been to see the new Led Zeppelin movie. I did put in the title, is it going to be good or bad? It's absolutely brilliant. It's a brilliant movie. Anyway, I just thought I'd go through some of the key points in this film that really, really stood out and made it such a special, special film. It starts with the Lindenberg Zeppelin flying across, and then it crashes and that. And you sort of think, that's Led Zeppelin, da, da, da. And then you forget it's the album cover for the first album. So they cheekily put that in there, which is really, really cool. And it's just one of those things where you forget about it. And then halfway through the movie, you kind of go, oh yeah, of course, that's what that was for. Of course, that's what it's for. So yeah, they do these little subtle bits like that in it, which is really, really nice. The film processing is amazing. The film looks absolutely incredible. It's pin sharp. The sound is amazing. We'll talk a bit about the sound in a minute. And it's just a fantastic movie. Like, even if you're not a fan of the band, you'd really, really enjoy it. And if you're a fan of the band, you're going to absolutely love it. So you've got the four talking heads. You've got all four talking. They found an interview with John Bonham, and he's filling his parts for an interview. They said at the start, he didn't talk very much in interviews. He didn't really like him. And he passed away in 1980. So they cover that straight away. And then you get him going back to their stories and stuff like that, which is interesting. Jimmy Page credits, the first time he with Lonnie Donegan was where he was like, skiffle music and guitars. That's really where I want to do it. And there's some footage flying around. You've probably seen it where he's on a talent show with a guy and they play the longer version of that. So you get to see him really playing the guitar. And he sort of says, I was just doing the skiffle stuff and really, really enjoying it and bits and bobs like that. But it's just fantastic to see their early stories. John Paul Jones, basically, his dad was a piano player. And he said to him, come along with me. And he sort of just heard the bass and a record. And he said to his dad, bass, that's what I really want to do, Dad. And his dad said, give it 2 years, that'll be gone. Play a saxophone, you'll always have work. It's fantastic. It's really fantastic. So just to see John Bonham as well talking about his early days, because Led Zeppelin, you think they just had an easy ride getting together, but it wasn't like that at all. They had a rough ride getting together. They really, really did. But we'll go through that again in a minute. Obviously, if you've seen this film or you want to say hello, hit me up in the comments whenever you're watching, and you can say hello, and I'll say hello back to you live. Also, if you're a first-time viewer, if you could subscribe and help me out, that'd be absolutely amazing. So they go through the history of each band member. They sort of go into that quite in depth as well. Obviously, John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page were session players. They talk a lot about that, which is really, really nice as well. They played on Goldfinger, which I didn't know about. And they sort of said, you've got to get this right, because if you don't get it right, you're not going to be on the next session. So they were top of their game, whatever they got involved in all these sort of soundtracks, all that sort of music. They show you a lot of those footage videos of them doing sessions, and Jimmy says, my Black Gibson, I think it was, he said, that's the guitar that played on all of those records that you know me for, doing those sessions. That's the guitar. And then he's got that sort of Telecaster guitar that's got all the paint on it. And he said Jeff Beck gave him that, and he said, I painted it. I've ruined it with sacrilege. So it's really cool that he's talking stories and that. What's lovely as well is they're talking during the movie and they're playing bits of footage from their past, and you can see they're genuinely grinning about what happened and all that sort of stuff. At the time, Bonham was playing, he knew Page really early. I didn't know this. And then they went off and played bands, and it was his wife that's saying, stay away from Robert Plant, you'll get in trouble. So he joined the Tim Rose band, which I knew he did that. And he's playing with the Tim Rose band, and then they started to get people together, Jimmy and everyone met, and he said, we're going to get this drummer that we know. And they said, he went, forget that. I know this drummer you've got to have. He's absolutely amazing. And that's where Bonham comes into it. It's lovely seeing Bonham playing the drums, and he's flailing his arms around and he's doing his bits and bobs. And then they said in the video, he plays from the wrists. He used to move his arms a lot, but he's actually playing from the wrist a lot. So it looks like he's, a caveman banging on drums, and he's going absolutely bonkers. But he's playing from the wrist a lot. And it's just really lovely to hear he's playing. They've remastered the sounds of the soundtrack for this film. Amazing. Like, I was in the cinema. Don't get me wrong, there was 12 people in there. I counted. There was only 12 of us watching it. But as soon as Bonham hit that kick drum, poof, it literally knocks you back in your seat. You're like, here we go. And it was literally an assault on the senses. It was absolutely fantastic. They basically roughly got together, and then they rehearsed in London. And the first track they played was Trains Keeping A-Rollin. And he said, as soon as they played it, this is Robert Plant, he said, as soon as we played it, we knew we had something special. He said straight away it was just electric. They just knew when they all got together. But when you think about it, you've got John Paul Jones and Jimmy Page were playing for years on that session circuits. They could play anything at the drop of a hat. They just get music and read it, and they'd just be done, and they knew exactly what they're doing. So for them to get together and lock in like that is not a surprise. They make it sound a bit like, oh, it could have worked, it might not. It was like, it was going to work. It was going to work because they're such great players. They really are great players, and it's just, just to see them all together jamming and smiling is absolutely brilliant. John Paul Jones says an amazing thing. He said, I fell in love with Bonham's right foot. And he said what he would do is he would play, and then there would be, he would deliberately leave bass notes out so that John Bonham's kick drum would come through. And that's what their playing style was like. So when they sort of said that, and you listen to it a little bit later on in the records, you can actually hear it in the soundtrack. You go, yeah, actually, he didn't play a bass note there, and you hear the kick drum come beating in and stuff like that. And there's lots of shots of like Bonham from above, so you see him playing with his overarm style, all that sort of stuff. That's really, really great as well. It's just a really well put together movie. It's about 2 hours long, but it really doesn't feel like it. When they get a documentary right and they just cram so much stuff in so fast that it becomes enjoyable. That's what this was like. It's a really enjoyable documentary to watch, and just to hear the soundtrack on there is absolutely amazing. What Jimmy Page was saying was about the albums, especially going back to John Bonham. There was, he said that what they would do is he's Page produced most of the albums, all of the albums, with like Kramer mixing and Jimmy Kramer mixing, Eddie Kramer, sorry, who did the Hendrix albums. And what they would do is they would do the drums. It's an idea people don't really do much anymore, but they would use the sound field for that. So the ride cymbal would be on this side, the snare would be on this side, the tom would be there, another tom would be there, and the kick drum and the snare would be in the middle. So when Bonham was playing the drums, you got a sound field going across. Now I remember that being used quite a lot in the 70s and the 80s, and it's kind of died off now. People don't do that kind of mixing anymore. But when you sort of think about it that way, and then you hear it again later, like everything they spoke about in the film, they would talk about again later, and you would actually hear what they're talking about. So even if you're not a musician and you don't understand it, when they explain it and you actually listen for a second, you go, oh, I get that. That's what they do. That's what they did with it. It's absolutely brilliant. What they did was as well, they made the first album. Jimmy basically, and the guys funded it themselves. They did it a really clever way. So they funded the album. And then what they did was they then took it to Atlantic, because Jimmy was doing session work, so he knew people in the record industries. They went to Atlantic with it and signed to Jerry Wexler in Atlantic. So they were getting basically all the royalties, but also they had control over their music. So, it wasn't like they were in the recording studio doing something and someone would come in and go, yeah, you can't use that snare, and I think you should turn that up, and they've got to go, all right, then we're not paying for this, fair enough. They literally had control. So really, I think they just did the distributing Atlantic and then put on tours and pay for bits and bobs like that. So that was a really smart way around, because he knew that no one could interfere with his album, and his vision on how he wanted it. There's loads of great footage of them playing live as well, and Jimmy gets out his bow and he's playing the guitar, the Telecaster with it, that sort of sweeping stuff. There's a really funny Spinal Tap sketch, and I think it's in the film, I don't think it's in the other film, and Nigel Tufner's doing that, and he starts tuning the violin bow not the guitar. Oh, it's brilliant. Anyway, so there's a lot of that sort of footage in it, and he sort of said, we got so good we would play off each other, and there's a bit where he's going like, yeah, and then Page would do it with his vocals, and they were smiling at each other. Because when you look at Zeppelin live, they didn't smile a lot, but this is when they started to interact, you could really see they were sort of smiling and getting into it. And then they show you a part of their first gig. I don't think it was London, I think it was somewhere else, because there's lots of gig dates popping up, and then they just walk on stage and they're playing Dazed and Confused, and the audience are sitting there with their fingers in their ears, and it's almost like they went to Blackpool, for argument's sake, in the 1960s, and put them at the end of a pier and just went, play to this crowd. And it was like young kids, and it was like older people. There was people there that were like this, like, with their arms folded, looking around, and they're playing this amazing music and playing this amazing solo. And they're just sitting there, just, arms folded, looking in the sky. And then there's these little kids like this, just not wanting to listen to it because it was too loud, I guess, for them. And it's just mind-blowing to see it like that. And you think they just witnessed genius, and they didn't even know it at the time. It's absolutely brilliant as well. With the first album, they recorded it in Olympic Studios in Barnes. I've been there. It's now been all ripped out. There's a little bit of a room, and it's mainly a hairdresser's now. And a movie theatre, I think it is. And he said they were going in at 11 o'clock at night. He gets out his Page gets out his book at one point and shows you his appointment book when he's doing sessions, and it's like Tom Jones the Rolling Stones, the Herman's Hermits, you name it. Donovan, he played a lot of Donovan stuff as well. And he says, I didn't play with the Beatles though. And then when it gets to Olympic, it's a bit like Queen, when Queen did Trident back in the early 70s when they were doing their first album. Queen could only go in at like 11 o'clock at night and things like that. And Zeppelin were doing the same. They were going in at 11 p.m. recording at night time. I mean, they night hours anyway, but they were doing nighttime stuff just to record the album, get it down, get it done, get it made, just so they had the album. So it's interesting that those two bands had the same sort of struggle. Queen, didn't break America because, they didn't work for them, but they slogged for America. They show you the slog that they literally just trailed for America constantly until they started to pick up steam. And he said they went from east to west, not west to east. So he said by the time we got to the west, it was, people had heard about it. And he said we were in America, they would play. John Peel did it, to be fair, in England eventually, but they play the whole side of a record. And Jimmy Page says, we didn't want singles. We didn't want anything to take from the artistic, what's the word? The integrity of the whole album. He said we just wanted people to play the whole album and for it all to make sense and bits and bobs like that. So there was a whole structure going on, which is really brave for a new band. That he said, we want to do this, we want to do that, and they had an idea of what they wanted, and to get it out there, and they were brave. But this goes back to them being smart and saying, we own our own record. You do what you want with it, but you're not going to cut singles of it. You're not going to do anything with it. So it goes back to that, which is really, really smart. They recorded Led Zeppelin 2 in America pretty much. They, Jimmy and the boys wanted to go to the States, and they wanted to move around different studios and record in lots of different places and capture the vibe of the people and the audience. And I think you get that from when they start playing excerpts from the second album. You can hear it sort of just in your face, and it's sort of, it just hits you when you hear the second album, and it has got more vibrancy to it. And that kind of makes sense as well. Not that the first album isn't any good, but what I mean is that you can hear the influence of the road and the people, like he was saying on that as well, which is interesting. It's nice to have John Bonham talking through the whole documentary about his life and music and drums and bits like that. And there's a lovely bit right at the start where they said John Bonham was really, really influenced by like Motown and James Brown's drummers. When you see them and go, what is that? That's amazing. And then after that, they were doing, I think it was the Soul Philadelphia Festival. And then he's playing alongside all James Brown's drummers. And they said, he was doing a sound check and he's warming up and he's smashing the drums and mashing them up. And they're all coming out, these idols of his are going, what's that noise? What's going on? What's that? And it was him all along, he knew what he was doing, bless him. And it's just really great to watch. It's really great to watch. It's a 2-hour movie. It's mega interesting. Like there's lots of bits and details in there you've never seen before, lots of footage you've never seen before as well. And Robert Plant had the roughest journey out of everybody. Most people's, like John Bonham, apart from his wife Pat, wasn't very said like stay away from Planty. Jimmy Page and John Bonham's parents were quite supportive of their music careers. Robert Plant didn't have that. His parents wanted him to be a chartered accountant, and they said, do that or leave. And he basically left, and he was homeless. He had a suitcase and he was bumming around. He really took the rough end of the stick to be the star he is today. And anything, I walked out with more respect for him. I thought, what a true legend that is, because he stuck to his guns, stuck to his dream, and he absolutely got there as well. It's a brilliant movie. It's an absolutely brilliant documentary. It's called Becoming Zeppelin. I hope they do Being Zeppelin, because like I said, this only goes up to the second album. I hope they do like 3 to 5, including No Quarter, and do the rest of it, because that would be a really, really great watch as well. It's absolutely fantastic. Oh, Roger says that's better. Thank you, Roger. I had no sound. I just came on live and nothing was working, so you can hear me now. Thank you, Roger. I really appreciate that, mate. So it's a fantastic movie. Definitely check it out. It's definitely worth a watch. Try and go and see it at the cinema if you can, because you need to hear it that loud, smash you in the face, just absolutely hitting you like that, because it's just absolutely breathtaking. It's a brilliant documentary. It's one of the best I've seen. The Eagles one is a brilliant one. That's definitely going to be up there with that one as well. And the Beatles anthology, when they remastered that, which they need to do this year, is just as good as well. Thanks for watching. If you'd like and subscribe, your first time viewer, that'd be absolutely amazing. And thanks for just checking this out with me. I just had to jump on and talk about it because it was just so good. It's so good. I'm going to dig the Zeppelin out and play a bit now. Anyway, love and peace. I'll see you soon.